And as he walked in, they said, oh, no, you can't go in. You have to put on a gown. You have to put on a mask. You have to put on gloves. And he walked in. And they were freaking out because rabies is one of the most contagious diseases there. You can get rabies by just being in the presence of touching. If you see a dog that's acting strangely, don't touch it because it might have rabies. You could get rabies from just touching the dog. So here he is bringing her the holy mysteries. And he puts his stole on, and the moment he's taking the holy spoon to give the gifts upon this woman's open mouth, foam comes out. And what does he do? He immediately takes the golden spoon and collects the holy gifts and consumes them himself. The staff at the hospital went absolutely nuts. We got to get treatment immediately started on you. You've just been exposed to rabies in the most horrible way. And you know what he said as he was walking in? I just consumed the holy gifts, which are for healing of body and soul. I cannot get rabies from that. And he didn't. I mean, when I was about 12, I asked my Lutheran minister, I said, Pastor Witt, why is it that we don't have miracles today? I mean, when I was a kid, I never experienced a miracle. Never did. And the pastor's response was, oh, God used miracles to jumpstart the church. And I remember walking home from Sunday school thinking, I could sure use a good jumpstart. It doesn't seem fair that God only lets the New Testament people see miracles. It wasn't until I was Orthodox that I realized that miracles are an everyday occurrence in the Orthodox Church. One experience that I had on Mount Athos is I wanted to go to the place at the Great Lavra, the oldest monastery, built in 900s. Because there's the place where the bones of the monks are laid. After they're dead and buried for 3 years, they're dug up, and in this place they took them to the charnel house. And I really wanted to see the charnel house. But I didn't know whether it would be unseemly for a monk from America to ask, where's the charnel house? So I went out through the great wall of the monastery with the prayer, God, show me where the charnel house is. So I rounded the corner of this great wall, and I was walking, and I saw steps that went up with a picket fence with a gate. And there was a building there that had no door on it. And I knew that's the charnel house. So I went up those steps, and I went through the gate, and I walked in, and I'm looking at the bones of over 3,000 monks and I think 36 bishops and patriarchs and they're all around there, and then dirt would be put in there over some of the bones. And I walked in, and I did what St. Anthony the Great did. I picked up a skull, and I held it. And I looked at that, and I said out loud, this is me, this is my future. And then I set this down, and I went back into the church, into the great entrance of the monastery. And as I walked in, my friend Father Basil, who was with me, said, Father, quick, come. They're about to start a service to the Panagia in this little chapel that's just inside the Great Lavra's walls. And so I went in there, and there was this huge icon that was on this side of the iconostasis is about this wide and probably about that tall from the floor. And it was sort of propped slightly like this for veneration. And the story of this icon was that this was an icon that miraculously appeared on a tree just inside the monastery's gate. And when the monks found this miraculous icon, they immediately took it in procession and brought it into the Catholicon built by St. Athanasius the Great, the founder of the monastery. The next morning, it was missing. They ran around, what happened to the icon? They found it on the tree. With great solemnity, they brought it back into the church. And the next morning, it was gone. And they went straight to the tree, and there she was. So they finally decided, well, I guess she wants to be there. So they built this beautiful little Byzantine church to house this great icon. So here I am, I come in, and I took off my book and I did the 2 prostrations before the icon. And then you venerate the icon and you step back and you do another prostration. And then you turn and the monk will show you where you're to stand for the rest of the service. So as I started to venerate the icon with my first prostration, I heard the Holy Virgin speak to me. And I knew it was her. Her voice was as familiar as my grandmother's voice to me. And what did she say? She said, "You too were a tourist." That's all she said. You too were a tourist. Well, earlier in the day, we all do it. Earlier in the day, I had been complaining bitterly to Father Basil about all the German tourists that were trekking around the monastery grounds and on the trails. They weren't Orthodox, but they got their 3-day permit to go to the monastery, and they get their free stays and food at each monastery as they're trekking on these ancient Byzantine trails. And I remember at the Great Lavra, when I went into the room, the small chapel off to the left before you go into the main part of the Catholicon, there's a small side chapel, and that's where the tomb, the relics are of St. Athanasius. And then next to that is a room that had, it was like a little library shelves on all 4 sides. And go through this door. And then there's glass covering these shelves. And all the shelves are holding relics of the monastery. And you can go in there, and I took my prayer rope and, reached out to touch before the various relics to, for the blessing for me to take back to America with them having touched that, been touched, the prayer rope touching these holy relics. But I was having a struggle because there were all these German tourists. And, they weren't in there as Orthodox believers, they were tourists. And oh, look at that, and oh my gosh, look at this. And I'm there for godly reasons, and they're there for worldly reasons, and it just irked me. It really irked me. And I was complaining, why do they even allow these people here? And then I venerated this icon. Actually, I didn't venerate the icon after that. I was too ashamed. I didn't feel worthy to even put my lips on that icon. And so after the second prostration, I kissed the base of the frame around the icon with downcast eyes. And as I turned after the third prostration, and there was a monk pointing to a monastic stall for me, and I just went like this. And I went at the very back of this little Byzantine temple. And I discovered why pillars are there. They're for sinners like me to hide behind in shame. And I knelt down and I took the sleeves of my rasa and I buried my face and I put my face to the floor behind this massive temple pillar. And I wept like I've never wept before. And at the end of the service, Father Basil went looking for me. He said, "Oh, here you are. The service is over. They're going to lock the church. We have to leave." And, my eyes were bloodshot from weeping, and tears were streaming down. And I just got up, and I didn't even feel worthy to go back to venerate the icon. I just bowed, and I went out. And I walked. And then the monk saw me and he says, "I'm sorry, but all visitors have to be in the visitors' quarters. Everything is locked up and we don't want people roaming around." So I went in to where I was staying in this room with a bunch of guest beds, and Father Basil was there, and this young Thaddeus, who was a layman, son of a priest, that was with us. And I walked in, and Father Basil could see that I had been crying. He said, "What's wrong? What happened?" I couldn't tell him. It literally took me more than a month before I was able to finally tell Father Basil what had happened. And Father Basil said, "Oh, that is one of the few icons on the Holy Mountain that has been known to move by itself, flow forth tears, which is a call to repentance, and from the stars at different times in the hands to flow forth holy myrrh for healing." And he said, "But there's another thing it's known for. It's the only icon on the Holy Mountain that has spoken." And all I heard in that correction in my soul, all I felt was love. It wasn't like, "Shame on you." It wasn't that at all. It was, the only thing I could compare it to, it would have been like my beloved grandmother saying to me, "David, I'm really ashamed of you." She wouldn't have said that in disgust. She would have said that as my beloved grandmother who loved me more than anybody. And that's how I felt in front of that icon.
And then we're going to have a little 10-minute break. You can stretch your legs a little bit and come back in 10 minutes. And we'll send someone looking for you if you're not back. And then you can tell us what those things have to do with us.
All right? It's a deal.